Hi, it's Sheridan Webb here from the Training Designers Club, which is the place to go for practical L&D support, especially if you work on your own. And today I have another musing, and it comes because at the weekend my husband and I decided to go out, which meant that we were forced to speak to each other. And it was quite interesting because although our jobs are very different, he's actually a surgeon, we do have some overlap because he is also responsible to a large extent for the training of junior doctors in their hospital trust. And one of the things he does every Friday is he teaches the students very specific things in relation to his speciality, which is ENT. And to make that teaching as relevant as possible, he likes to ask them what they would like to focus on because they're only with them for a very short amount of time. And obviously, there's a huge amount of things that could be covered. This particular week, the students said they wanted to learn things to help them pass their exam. So we said, well, yeah, we can cover some of that, but I also want to make sure that you've got some real world practical advice and take that away from your time with us today. And he said, so what do you want to know? And a couple of them put their hands up and said, can you teach us how to do this specific procedure? Because we know that it's going to be covered in the exam. I don't know the name of it. If I try and remember, I will get it wrong. But he said, yeah, I understand that's covered in the exam, but how many of you have seen any doctor do that thing in real life? And not a single one of them had. And he said, to be totally honest with you, nobody has done this procedure that way for over 30 years. Even when I was a student back in the 90s, it didn't often happen. It was only really the old doctors who were due for retiring were still using this particular method to make this particular diagnosis. Yes, it was the right way to do things in the 60s and the 70s. It's still being used probably until the 90s, but now we don't do it that way anymore. Unfortunately, the syllabus for the medical school training hasn't been changed. Now, obviously, a lot of things to do with medical school don't change. Anatomy is still anatomy. Biochemistry is still biochemistry. But real world practices do change. So to insist on teaching people how to do a procedure that, whilst it isn't wrong, it isn't the way that things happen in real life, and it certainly isn't the best way of doing it, just seems a little bit silly. And it really made me think as well about, the training that we design. And I'm not saying that theories that were created in the 70s and the 80s or even earlier than that should automatically be thrown out, because a lot of them still stand the test of time. But what has changed is the way those theories show up. So I often use the example of action-centered leadership because it's not wrong. However, if you look at the way it was defined back when it was actually created, the examples are now dated. So we need to bring that fundamental theory up to date and make sure it's relevant for the real world. And it's also made me think about the extent to which we rely on theories and models in training. Do people really need to know the theories and models, or do they need to know how to behave? What are the skill sets? What are the things they need to say and do? Because actually, that's way more important than being able to explain an underlying theory. And we know that theories are just foundations. It is just a rough sketch of how things work. It's not how everything works every single time. It is just a start of a 10 a lot of the time. So if our training is focusing more on explaining theories, defining models, that doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to go away from that training being able to do anything differently. So we need to design training that's very much reflected on real world good practice. What do people need to say and do to do all of the things they need to do in their jobs to be successful? So rather than starting with a theory or a model and trying to make everything fit that theory or model, which it won't, we perhaps need to focus more on what good looks like. What is good practice? We can get all of the ideas and common elements all together, and then we can say, and there's a theory that will help you that kind of brings all of this together. So let's look at that theory in the context of what we have been discussing. How might you use that to inform your practice when you're out there actually doing the work that you need to do? So it's just a little bit of a twist, I think. I'm not saying that we shouldn't use theories and models. They do have their place, but we do need to make sure that they are being explained in a relevant manner, in context, and using examples which are completely up to date. Otherwise, we're just teaching people theory for the sake of teaching them theory to say that they have passed a test so that we can tick a box rather than actually make a difference to their performance. So hope that's given you something to think about. For more ideas, check out the rest of the YouTube channel. I've got Monday Musings and more specific videos covering particular training challenges. You might also want to check out the Training Design podcast, and of course, visit the website where you'll find lots of free and low-cost resources and have the opportunity to join our VIP community where you can have a whole team of people, including me, in your back pocket to help make your training design quicker, easier, and less stressful.